Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Fall. Hunter Allen had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in construction management, building his company from nothing, had taught him to spot lies, deceit, and weakness from a mile away. But as he watched his 4-year-old son, Charlie, writhing in pain on the emergency room gurney, Hunter realized he'd been blind to the most important deception of all. How did this happen again? Dr. Kevin Houston asked, his experienced hands carefully examining Charlie's twisted arm. He was climbing the oak tree in our backyard, Hunter explained, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. I was inside taking a business call when I heard him scream. The doctor nodded, but Hunter caught something odd in his expression, a flicker of recognition when Sabrina Allen walked through the automatic doors. His wife moved with her usual calculated grace, designer heels clicking against the hospital floor, her expression one of practiced concern. "How is he?" Sabrina asked, her voice carrying just the right amount of maternal worry. But Hunter had spent 15 years married to this woman, and something felt wrong. Her timing was too perfect, her demeanor too controlled. Dr. Houston's reaction was immediate and unsettling. The color drained from his face as his eyes locked onto Sabrina. Without breaking eye contact, he whispered something to the nurse beside him. Hunter caught only fragments. "Get security. It's her." "I'm sorry, what's the problem?" Hunter stepped forward, his protective instincts flaring. Dr. Houston quickly composed himself, but the damage was done. "Nothing, Mr. Allen. Just standard protocol. Let's focus on Charlie." As a medical team worked on his son's fractured arm, Hunter's mind raced. The doctor knew his wife. The question was how, and why that knowledge had triggered such an alarmed response. Sabrina remained by Charlie's bedside, playing the perfect mother, but Hunter noticed details he'd previously overlooked. The way she checked her phone obsessively. How she'd arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after he'd called her, despite claiming she was only 10 minutes away at the grocery store. Most disturbing was her reaction when Charlie had first fallen. That strange laugh she'd made, quickly covered by concern. "Daddy, my arm hurts," Charlie whimpered. "I know, buddy. The doctors are going to fix you up." Hunter squeezed his son's good hand, but his eyes remained on Sabrina. After Charlie was sedated and taken for x-rays, Hunter cornered Dr. Houston in the hallway. "I need to know why you reacted that way to my wife." The doctor hesitated, clearly wrestling with professional ethics and personal conviction. "Mr. Allen, I can't discuss other patients, but be careful. Some people aren't who they seem." "What does that mean?" "Just watch your son closely, and maybe ask yourself how someone falls from a tree that way. That kind of break usually requires significant force or a very specific angle of impact." Hunter's blood ran cold. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything officially. But off the record, I've seen injuries like this before. They don't typically come from simple falls." 3 hours later, Charlie was released with a cast and pain medication. The drive home was silent except for his son's occasional whimpers. Hunter's mind churned with dark possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. Back at their sprawling suburban home, Hunter helped Charlie into bed while Sabrina disappeared into her study, claiming she had urgent emails to handle. Through the baby monitor, Hunter heard Charlie mumbling in his medicated haze. "Mommy pushed. The tree was too high. She said Daddy wouldn't know." Hunter's hands clenched into fists. He sat in the darkness of Charlie's room long after his son fell asleep, staring at the innocent face of the child he'd killed to protect. For the first time in their marriage, Hunter allowed himself to truly see his wife not as the woman he'd fallen in love with, but as a stranger whose actions no longer made sense. The pieces were there, the unexplained absences, the phone calls that ended when he entered rooms, the gradual emotional distance. But this was different. If Sabrina had hurt Charlie, if she was capable of harming their child, then everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie. Hunter Allen had built his reputation on being methodical, thorough, and above all, unforgiving to those who crossed him. Construction was a ruthless business, and he'd crushed competitors and dealt with betrayers with cold efficiency. But this was personal. This was his family. As he finally left Charlie's room, Hunter caught sight of Sabrina through her study doorway. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, her back to the door. He moved closer, staying in the shadows. No, it was risky, but he was getting suspicious anyway. The hospital thing was just bad luck? No, Hunter doesn't suspect anything yet. Hunter retreated to his own study, his mind already shifting into the calculating mode that had made him successful. Tomorrow, he would begin investigating the woman he'd shared his bed with for 15 years. And if what he suspected was true, Sabrina Allen would learn why crossing Hunter Allen was the biggest mistake of her life. Chapter 2. The Investigation. Hunter Allen owned a construction empire worth $20 million because he understood the value of information and patience. Over the next 2 weeks, while caring for Charlie and maintaining the facade of normalcy, he quietly dismantled his wife's life piece by piece. His first call was to Luke Hammond, a private investigator who'd helped him with corporate espionage and background checks on potential business partners. Luke was ex-military, discreet, and had zero tolerance for people who hurt children. "I need everything on my wife," Hunter said during their meeting at a construction site downtown. "And I mean everything. Financial records, phone logs, medical history, where she goes when she's not home." Luke studied his old friend's face. "Hunter, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes ignorance is." "She hurt my son." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Luke caught the volcanic rage beneath the surface. "Understood. Give me 72 hours. While Luke worked his magic, Hunter conducted his own investigation. He installed tracking software on Sabrina's phone and car, hidden cameras throughout the house, and began monitoring her activities with the precision of a military operation. The first revelation came within days. Sabrina's grocery shopping trips were visits to a downtown apartment complex. Her spa days were lengthy afternoons at the same location. The expensive work dinners with her marketing firm colleagues were elaborate lies. She quit that job 6 months ago. Hunter sat in his truck outside the apartment building on a Wednesday afternoon, watching his wife enter Unit 4B. Through Luke's preliminary report, he already knew the apartment belonged to Elliot Porter, a 32-year-old personal trainer with a criminal record including assault and drug possession. What Hunter discovered next nearly broke his legendary self-control. Luke's full report arrived via encrypted email, and Hunter read it in his locked study while Sabrina played with Charlie in the living room, maintaining her motherly charade. Subject: Sabrina Douglas Allen. Comprehensive background report. "Mr. Allen, you need to sit down for this. Your wife isn't who you think she is. Real name, Sabrina Douglas. Born in Nevada. Married twice before you. Both husbands died under suspicious circumstances. First husband, Timothy Douglas, died in a hunting accident when she was 23. She inherited his $800,000 life insurance policy. Second husband, Marcus Woods, died in a car crash 2 years later. Another $1.2 million payout. She moved to your city 5 years before meeting you and created an entirely new identity. The marketing job, the college degree, even her medical history, all fabricated. More concerning, Dr. Kevin Houston recognized her because she brought another child to that same ER 3 years ago, a little girl with suspicious injuries. The child died 2 days later from complications. The case was never prosecuted due to lack of evidence, but Houston never forgot her face. Current situation: she's been living a double life for at least 8 months with Elliot Porter. Porter has connections to unsavory people, including individuals who specialize in making problems disappear permanently. Final note: I found evidence she's been slowly poisoning you with small doses of antifreeze in your coffee. The symptoms would mimic heart disease. Your life insurance policy is worth $3.5 million. I'm attaching all documentation. Call me immediately. Luke. Hunter's hand shook as he scrolled through bank records showing Sabrina's secret accounts, photographs of her with Elliot Porter, and medical records indicating the gradual buildup of toxins in his system, toxins that would eventually kill him and look like natural causes. The woman in his living room, the one Charlie called Mommy, was a calculating serial killer who'd murdered her previous husbands and was slowly working on him. Worse, she'd already started targeting Charlie, probably because a 4-year-old witness was becoming inconvenient. Hunter's phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Kiss Charlie for me." Through his security cameras, he watched her leave 20 minutes later, designer purse in hand, completely unaware that her husband now knew everything. Hunter poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in his study, staring at surveillance photos of his wife kissing another man, a man who helped her plan murders. For most people, discovering such a betrayal would be devastating. For Hunter Allen, it was clarifying. He'd built his fortune by being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Competitors who tried to undercut his bids found their equipment mysteriously breaking down. Business partners who attempted to cheat him discovered their other ventures suddenly facing regulatory scrutiny. Workers who stole from his sites were blacklisted industry-wide within days. Hunter Allen didn't just win. He crushed those who opposed him so thoroughly they served as warnings to others. Sabrina had made 3 critical errors. First, she'd underestimated her target. Second, she'd hurt his child. Third, she'd assumed Hunter was just another mark to be manipulated and murdered. She was about to learn why that assumption would cost her everything. Hunter opened his laptop and began typing. By morning, he'd have a comprehensive plan that would destroy both Sabrina and Elliot Porter in ways they couldn't imagine. But first, he had a phone call to make. "Luke, it's Hunter. I need you to expand the operation. We're not just gathering information anymore. We're going to war." Chapter 3, The Setup. Hunter Allen had always believed in the principle of overwhelming force. When a competitor tried to steal his clients, he didn't just outbid them. He bought their suppliers, hired their best workers, and crushed their ability to operate. When dealing with a serial killer masquerading as his wife, the same philosophy applied. 3 weeks after discovering Sabrina's true nature, Hunter had assembled what he privately called his board of war. The meeting took place in the basement of his construction company's headquarters, a soundproof room originally designed for confidential client meetings. Luke Hammond sat across from Hunter, files spread across the table like battle plans. Beside him was Annie Garcia, a forensic accountant who specialized in untangling complex financial crimes. At the far end sat Johnny Hall, a former Marine who now ran security consulting for Hunter's more sensitive projects. Status report. Hunter said, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. Luke consulted his notes. "Sabrina and Elliot are escalating. We intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to accelerate your timeline. The poisoning was supposed to take months, but they're getting impatient. Meaning, they're discussing more direct action. Elliot mentioned a staged home invasion for this weekend while you're supposedly at the construction site in Millfield." Hunter nodded. He'd expected this. Sabrina knew he always worked Saturday mornings on major projects, and their home security system had convenient blind spots she'd probably mapped for Elliot. Annie Garcia opened her laptop. "I've traced Sabrina's financial network. She's got accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Panama. Total liquid assets around $4 million, all from her previous husband's life insurance policies. But here's the interesting part. Elliot Porter isn't just her lover. He's her business partner." Explain. "They've done this before with other couples. Elliot identifies wealthy, isolated targets. Sabrina gets close to them, marries them, and they execute the plan. They've been operating for at least 7 years. I found connections to at least 6 suspicious deaths across 3 states." Johnny Hall leaned forward. "What about the authorities?" "That's where it gets complicated," Luke interjected. "Elliot's brother is Detective Zachary Jackson with the state police. Family loyalty runs deep, and Zachary's been protecting Elliot for years. Any official investigation would tip them off." Hunter absorbed this information without visible reaction. He'd suspected the corruption went deeper than simple murder for insurance schemes. "What about the child who died at the hospital?" "Charlotte Fowler, age 6. Sabrina was dating the girl's father, Marcus Fowler. The child died from what appeared to be complications from a fall, but Dr. Houston suspected abuse. Before he could push for a formal investigation, the father died in a car accident and Sabrina disappeared. Let me guess. Another life insurance payout. $2.3 million. Hunter stood and walked to the window overlooking his construction yard. Dozens of workers moved with purposeful efficiency, building something permanent and strong. It reminded him why he'd always succeeded where others failed. He thought in terms of foundations and long-term stability. Here's what's going to happen, he said, turning back to his team. We're not just going to stop them. We're going to destroy them so completely that it serves as a message to anyone else who might think Hunter Allen is an easy target. He moved to a whiteboard and began sketching. Phase 1. We let them think their plan is working. Sabrina believes she's been slowly poisoning me and that Elliot will stage a home invasion this weekend. Instead, we're going to give them exactly what they want, with modifications. Luke raised an eyebrow. You want to let them try to kill you? I want them to think they've succeeded. Annie, I need you to create a paper trail showing I've been experiencing heart problems. Doctor visits, prescriptions, the works. Make it look like the poisoning is working faster than expected. What about Charlie? Johnny asked. Hunter's expression hardened. Charlie will be safely away. My sister Trinity McCarty is taking him to Disney World this weekend. As far as anyone knows, it's a surprise trip I arranged because I've been feeling guilty about working too much. And Sabrina? Sabrina thinks she's attending her college roommate's wedding in Chicago this weekend. She'll have perfect alibis for when things go wrong for me at home. Annie looked confused. I don't understand the endgame. Hunter smiled, and for the first time since discovering his wife's true nature, it was genuine. Elliot Porter is going to break into my house to stage my death. Instead, he's going to find himself in a very different situation. By Sunday morning, both Elliot and Detective Zachary Jackson will be facing choices that will destroy them. What about Sabrina? Sabrina is going to learn that her new widow's inheritance isn't quite what she expected. In fact, she's going to find herself in a position where she'll beg me to take her back. And that's when she'll discover what I do to people who hurt my son. Luke leaned back in his chair. Hunter, whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it afterward. Hunter thought about Charlie's broken arm, about the toxins in his bloodstream, about the child who died because no one stopped Sabrina in time. I can live with anything except letting them hurt more people. We start tomorrow. As his team filed out, Hunter remained in the basement, finalizing details that would ensure Elliot Porter's weekend home invasion became something far more memorable than murder. By the time he was finished planning, Hunter realized he was actually looking forward to Saturday night. Chapter 4. The Bait. Friday morning arrived with typical suburban normalcy. Hunter made breakfast while Sabrina fussed over Charlie's cast, playing the caring mother with Academy Award-worthy performance. Charlie, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered excitedly about his upcoming trip with Aunt Trinity. I still think it's excessive, letting him fly across the country just for a theme park, Sabrina said, buttering toast with movements a shade too precise. He's been through trauma, Hunter replied, watching her through the reflection in the kitchen window. A little distraction will help him heal. What Sabrina didn't know was that Trinity McCarty was already in town, staying at a hotel under an assumed name. Charlie would be safely away by noon, but his departure would look spontaneous to anyone watching. Hunter's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Kevin Houston. Lab results ready. Recommend immediate consultation. The text was part of the performance, but Sabrina's reaction was real, a flash of satisfaction quickly hidden behind concern. Is everything okay? You seem tired lately. Probably just stress from the Millfield project. I'll see the doctor next week. Another text, this one from Luke, package delivered. The package was Elliot Porter's weekend assignment. Through carefully planted information, Elliot now believed Hunter would be alone Saturday night, working late at the construction site, and that the house's security system would be down for routine maintenance. What Elliot didn't know was that Hunter would be very much at home, waiting. I need to run errands, Sabrina announced after breakfast. Pick up my dress from the dry cleaner. Get a pedicure before the wedding. Hunter kissed her cheek, tasting lies. Drive safely. I love you. Love you too. As Sabrina's Mercedes pulled out of the driveway, Hunter's real day began. He called Trinity, who arrived within minutes, to collect Charlie. The boy was thrilled to see his aunt, and completely bought the story about a surprise vacation. "Take care of Daddy while I'm gone," Charlie told Sabrina when she returned from her errands that afternoon. "I will, sweetheart." The irony was so perfect Hunter almost laughed. That evening, as Sabrina packed for her fictional wedding, Hunter made his final preparations. Hidden cameras were positioned throughout the house. Johnny Hall was stationed in the neighbor's house. The Parson family was conveniently out of town, and their security system had mysteriously malfunctioned, allowing Johnny access. "Test the comms." Hunter spoke into his nearly invisible earpiece. "Clear as day," Johnny's voice responded. "Elliot drove by twice in the last hour. He's definitely planning something." "And Detective Jackson?" "Parked 3 blocks away in an unmarked car. He's running interference if anything goes wrong." Hunter smiled grimly. Both men thought they were hunting a lone victim. They had no idea they'd wandered into a predator's territory. At 8 p.m., Sabrina kissed him goodbye with the same lips that had probably kissed her previous husbands before their deaths. "I'll call when I land. Have fun at the wedding." The house felt different after she left. Not empty, but pregnant with possibility. Hunter changed into dark clothing and reviewed his preparations one final time. In the basement, Johnny Hall's military expertise had helped create what looked like a home gym, but was actually a specialized interrogation facility. Soundproof walls, restraints that appeared to be exercise equipment, and cameras positioned to capture everything. At 10 p.m., Hunter received the expected call from Sabrina. Airport noise in the background, perfectly staged. "Just boarding now. The flight's delayed, so I won't land until after midnight. Safe travels. Love you." At 11:47 p.m., motion sensors detected Elliot Porter approaching the house through the backyard. Hunter watched through hidden cameras as the younger man examined the security system, finding exactly the vulnerabilities he expected to find. Elliot was good. Hunter had to admit that. He moved through the darkened house like a professional, avoiding creaky floorboards and staying in the shadows. He'd obviously studied the layout extensively. What Elliot couldn't have known was that Hunter had studied him just as thoroughly. "He's in the kitchen," Johnny's voice whispered through the earpiece, moving toward the stairs. "Let him come to me." Hunter lay in his bed, breathing slowly and regularly, playing the part of a sleeping target. Through barely opened eyes, he watched Elliot Porter enter his bedroom, a syringe in his hand. Elliot moved with predatory confidence, approaching the bed where Hunter apparently slept deeply. The syringe was probably loaded with enough poison to kill a horse, Sabrina's new method for when patience ran out. Elliot raised the syringe. Hunter's hand shot out like a striking snake, crushing Elliot's wrist. The younger man's cry of pain was cut short by Hunter's other hand clamping over his mouth. "Hello, Elliot. We need to talk." Elliot's eyes went wide with shock and terror as Hunter's grip tightened. The syringe fell to the floor as Elliot realized his perfect victim had become his worst nightmare. "Not if you understand," Hunter whispered. Elliot nodded frantically. "Good, because we're going downstairs, and you're going to tell me everything about you and my wife." "And Elliot, if you try to run, if you try to fight, if you even think about calling for help, I'll make sure you live just long enough to regret it." Chapter 5, The Confession. In the basement of Hunter Allen's house, Elliot Porter learned the difference between being a predator and being prey. Hunter had zip-tied Elliot's hands to a weight bench with restraints that looked like standard gym equipment, but were designed for much darker purposes. A few feet away, hidden cameras captured every word and expression. "Let's start simple," Hunter said, settling into a chair across from his captive. "How many people have you and Sabrina killed?" Elliot's face was swollen from Hunter's initial restraint, his broken wrist cradled awkwardly, but his eyes still held defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about." Hunter nodded to Johnny Hall, who stepped from the shadows holding Elliot's cell phone. "We intercepted your communications. We know about the insurance payouts, the previous husbands, the children who got in the way. You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove anything in court, Elliot. This isn't about justice. It's about information." Hunter stood and walked to a tool rack along the basement wall. Construction work had familiarized him with implements designed to apply precisely controlled pressure to various materials. "You see," I learned something interesting about you. Your brother, Detective Zachary Jackson, has been covering your tracks for years. Family loyalty is admirable, but makes you both vulnerable. Elliot's confidence began to crack. What do you want? Everything. Names, dates, methods, bank accounts. How you target victims, how you eliminate witnesses, how long you've been operating. And if I don't tell you? Hunter selected a heavy-duty bolt cutter from the rack. Then I start removing pieces until you do. Beginning with fingers, moving to toes, then more essential parts. The color drained from Elliot's face. You're insane. No, Elliot. I'm practical. You and Sabrina hurt my son. You've been slowly poisoning me for months. You killed at least 6 other people, including a child. Insanity would be letting you live after this conversation. Hunter's matter-of-fact tone was more terrifying than any shouting. Elliot began to understand he wasn't dealing with a typical victim. Zachary will come looking for me. Your brother is sitting in his car 3 blocks away, waiting for your all-clear signal. But he's not going to get one. Hunter showed Elliot his own phone, displaying a text message ready to send. All done. Target eliminated. Heading home. 1 button press, and Zachary thinks you're safe at home. By the time he realizes something's wrong, this conversation will be over. Elliot stared at the message, realizing the completeness of his situation. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with Charlotte Fowler. For the next 2 hours, Elliot Porter confessed to a killing spree that spanned 7 years and 3 states. He detailed how he identified wealthy, isolated targets through gym memberships and social media. How Sabrina infiltrated their lives, playing the perfect girlfriend or wife. How they eliminated obstacles, previous wives, suspicious relatives, and children who witnessed too much. Charlotte Fowler had been killed because she'd seen Sabrina put something in her father's drink. Timothy Douglas had been shot during a stage hunting accident when he discovered Sabrina's previous marriage. Marcus Woods had been drugged and his car sent off a mountain road. The toxins in your coffee were just the beginning, Elliot explained, his voice hollow with resignation. Sabrina wanted it to look natural, but you were taking too long to die. This weekend was supposed to be a heart attack brought on by a home invasion gone wrong. What about Charlie? Elliot hesitated, then spoke quietly. Kids are problems. They see things, ask questions. Sabrina said he was getting suspicious about the fall from a tree. Hunter felt a rage, so pure it was almost meditative. The fall wasn't an accident. She pushed him. Not hard enough to kill him, just enough to make him afraid to tell you things. But when the doctor recognized her at the hospital, she knew Charlie would have to be dealt with eventually. Ow! Accidents happen to kids all the time. Drowning, falls, car crashes. We've done it before. Hunter pressed send on the text message to Detective Jackson, then set down Elliot's phone. Thank you for being so thorough. What happens now? Now you're going to call Sabrina and tell her there's been a complication. Hunter untied Elliot's good hand and handed him his phone. You're going to say the job went wrong, that I woke up and fought back, that you had to kill me messier than planned. Tell her she needs to come home immediately to help with cleanup before the police get involved. She'll never believe. She'll believe it because greed makes people stupid. Sabrina thinks she's about to inherit $3.5 million. She's not going to let a minor complication stop her. Elliot dialed with shaking fingers. Hunter listened as his wife received news of his apparent death with barely concealed excitement masked as shock and grief. I'll catch the first flight home, Sabrina said. Clean up everything. I'll be there by morning. After the call ended, Hunter looked at Elliot with something approaching pity. You know what's funny? You and Sabrina thought you were so smart, so careful, but you never considered that your victims might be smarter. What do you mean? Elliot, did you really think I'd make it this easy to rob and murder me? I've been 3 steps ahead of you since the day I found out what you were. Hunter walked to a cabinet and removed a small video camera. Every confession you just made is recorded. Every murder, every method, every victim. And in about 6 hours, when Sabrina walks into this house expecting to find my corpse, she's going to find something very different. Elliot's remaining defiance crumbled completely. Please. Please what? Please show mercy to serial killers who target children. Hunter checked his watch. Johnny's going to keep you company while I prepare for my wife's homecoming. Don't worry, Elliot. Your suffering is almost over. As Hunter climbed the basement stairs, Elliot Porter began to truly understand what it meant to be trapped by someone who played the game better than he did. Chapter 6. The Reckoning Begins. Saturday morning's dawn found Hunter Allen in his kitchen, brewing coffee with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. Upstairs, the bed remained unmade, stained with what appeared to be blood, but was actually theatrical makeup mixed with corn syrup. To anyone entering the house, it would look like a violent struggle had occurred. At 6:23 a.m., Sabrina's key turned in the front door. Hunter watched through hidden cameras as his wife entered their home, her designer luggage abandoned on the porch. She moved quickly through the house, calling Elliot's name in urgent whispers. "Elliot, where are you?" She found the bedroom first, gasping with apparent shock at the scene of carnage. Blood on the sheets, furniture overturned, her husband apparently dead and gone. Hunter had to admire her performance. The tears seemed genuine. "Oh God, Elliot, what happened here?" Sabrina pulled out her phone and dialed. Hunter heard Elliot's phone ringing in the basement, where the man himself sat zip-tied and contemplating his mortality. "Elliot, pick up. The police will be here soon. We need to get our story straight." She searched the house systematically, growing more agitated with each empty room. Finally, she discovered the basement door, which Hunter had left conspicuously ajar. "Elliot," as Sabrina descended into the basement, Hunter stepped out from his hiding place in the laundry room. "Hello, darling. Looking for someone." Sabrina spun around, her face cycling through shock, terror, and calculating fury in rapid succession. "Hunter? But you're—" "The blood upstairs. Corn syrup and food coloring. Very effective, don't you think?" She looked past him to Elliot, who sat restrained and broken on the weight bench. "What have you done?" "What have I done?" Hunter's voice remained conversational, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Sabrina, I've learned some fascinating things about my wife. For instance, did you know your real name is Sabrina Douglas? Or that you've been married twice before to men who died under suspicious circumstances?" Sabrina's expression hardened into something ugly and familiar. "I don't know what you're talking about. I also learned about Charlotte Fowler, the 6-year-old girl who died because she witnessed you poisoning her father." Elliot was very informative about that particular murder. "Elliot, you idiot," she hissed. "Don't blame Elliot. He held out for almost 20 minutes before telling me everything, including how you've been slowly poisoning me for months and planning to murder our son because he was becoming inconvenient." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Sabrina's face. "Where's Charlie?" "Safe. Far away from his murdering mother." Sabrina straightened, and Hunter saw the real woman beneath the facade, cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. "Fine. You know, what do you want? Money? I have accounts. I want justice." "Justice?" Sabrina laughed bitterly. "From a man who built his fortune crushing anyone who got in his way? Don't pretend you're better than me. Hunter, you're just angry you got outplayed." "Actually, I wasn't outplayed. Watch." Hunter activated a wall-mounted monitor that began playing Elliot's recorded confession. Sabrina's face went pale as she heard her partner detailing their murder spree in graphic detail. This recording, along with all supporting evidence, is currently in the possession of FBI Special Agent Malia Thomas. Agent Thomas specializes in interstate murder conspiracies and has been very interested in your activities. "You're lying. I'm practical. Did you really think I'd handle this alone?" Elliot's confession implicates Detective Zachary Jackson in obstruction of justice and accessory to murder charges. Your brother-in-law is probably being arrested as we speak. As if summoned by his words, Hunter's phone rang. He answered on speaker. "Mr. Allen? This is Agent Thomas. We have Detective Jackson in custody. He's already started talking about his brother's activities in exchange for a reduced sentence." Sabrina stared at the phone in horror. Zachary would never. "Zachary has a wife and 2 young children," Agent Thomas continued. "When faced with life in prison versus cooperation, family loyalty became relative." Hunter ended the call, and looked at his wife with something approaching satisfaction. "Elliot, Detective Jackson, and you are all going to prison. The evidence is overwhelming, and now that Jackson's cooperating, prosecutors won't need to rely solely on Elliot's confession." "This is impossible. You can't have planned all this." "Sabrina, I've been planning this since the day I found out what you were. Every move you've made, every decision Elliot and Jackson made, has been guided by information I wanted you to have." Hunter moved closer, and Sabrina instinctively backed away. "You see, I learned something important about you and Elliot. You're not as smart as you think you are. Smart killers don't operate in the same geographical area for 7 years. Smart killers don't keep detailed records of their crimes. And smart killers certainly don't trust family members with corrupt cops to keep them safe. What do you want from me?" "Nothing. You're finished, Sabrina. But before the FBI takes you away, I want you to understand something." Hunter's voice became deadly quiet. "You hurt my son. You tried to kill me. You murdered at least 6 people, including a child. There is nothing you could offer me that would make me show you mercy. Hunter, please. The only question now is whether you cooperate with authorities and spend life in prison, or whether you fight the charges and risk the death penalty." Sabrina looked around desperately, seeing no escape, no angle to work, no way to manipulate her way out of the trap that had closed around her. "How long have you known?" "Since the night Charlie broke his arm. Dr. Houston remembered you from when Charlotte Fowler died. And you've been planning this since then?" "I've been planning your destruction since then." "And Sabrina, this is just the beginning." Chapter 7. The Unraveling. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles had seen many high-profile cases, but the trial of Sabrina Douglas Allen drew particular attention. Serial killers who targeted their own families struck a primal fear in the American psyche, and the media circus was relentless. Hunter Allen sat in the front row of the gallery, watching his wife of 15 years face a jury of her peers. 6 months had passed since her arrest, and the federal prosecution had built an airtight case using Elliot's confession, Detective Jackson's cooperation, and the mountain of evidence Hunter's team had gathered. Sabrina looked different now. The designer clothes and perfect makeup had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit and institutional pallor. Her attorney, a public defender named Nicole Hill, was competent but outmatched by the federal prosecution team. "Mr. Allen," the prosecutor called, "please tell the court about the night of June 15th, when you discovered the defendant's true plans." Hunter took the witness stand with calm confidence. Over 3 days of testimony, he methodically destroyed any remaining sympathy the jury might have had for Sabrina. He described finding Charlie with his broken arm, Dr. Houston's warning, the months of investigation that revealed his wife's true nature. When the prosecutor displayed enlarged photographs of the crime scenes from Sabrina's previous victims, several jurors visibly recoiled. The image of Charlotte Fowler's hospital bed was particularly damaging. "And what did you do when you learned your wife had been poisoning you?" the prosecutor asked. "I protected my son and gathered evidence to ensure she could never hurt anyone else. Some might say you took the law into your own hands. I followed the law exactly. Every piece of evidence was gathered legally. Every recording was made on my own property with proper consent. I simply refused to be a victim." During cross-examination, Nicole Hill tried to paint Hunter as a vindictive husband who'd entrapped his wife. "Isn't it true, Mr. Allen, that you deliberately manipulated events to frame my client?" "I manipulated events to reveal her true nature. There's a difference. You created an elaborate deception. I created an opportunity for your client to demonstrate her murderous intent. She chose to take it. But if you hadn't set this trap..." "Ms. Hill, your client had already killed at least 6 people before she met me. I didn't create a killer. I simply exposed one." The defense's case collapsed under the weight of evidence. Elliot Porter had pled guilty in exchange for life without parole and testified extensively about their murder partnership. Detective Zachary Jackson, facing corruption charges, provided detailed information about how he'd protected his brother's activities. But it was Sabrina herself who delivered the most damaging testimony. Against her attorney's advice, she took the stand on the trial's final day, apparently believing she could charm the jury as she'd charmed her previous victims. "I never intended for anyone to get hurt," she began, her voice carefully modulated to project vulnerability. The prosecutor smiled. "Ms. Allen, you stated you never intended anyone to get hurt. How do you explain this recorded conversation with Elliot Porter, dated 3 weeks before your arrest?" The courtroom speakers played Sabrina's voice. "The kid is becoming a problem. We need to deal with him before he tells Hunter something that makes him suspicious. I was referring to sending Charlie away to boarding school. In this conversation from 2 days later, kids have accidents all the time. Pool drownings, falls downstairs. It would look completely natural." Sabrina's facade cracked as the prosecutor played recording after recording of her discussing murder with cold calculation. Her attempts to explain away the evidence only made her appear more manipulative. "Ms. Allen, in your expert opinion, how many children need to die to protect a murder conspiracy?" "That's not what I meant. How many husbands is it acceptable to poison for insurance money?" "You're twisting my words. Did you or did you not push your 4-year-old stepson, Charlie Allen, from a tree to intimidate him?" "Aye, he fell. Children fall. Yes or no, Ms. Allen? Did you push Charlie Allen?" For 10 seconds, the courtroom was silent. Then Sabrina's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold predator beneath. He was going to ruin everything. The jury's collective intake of breath was audible. Sabrina realized her mistake immediately, but the damage was done. Hunter watched his wife's complete psychological collapse with satisfaction. This was what happened when predators faced actual consequences for their actions. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sabrina screamed as the verdict was read. Her composure finally shattered completely. "This isn't fair. Hunter set me up. He manipulated everything." Judge Luke Hammond, coincidentally sharing a name with Hunter's private investigator, called for order. "Ms. Allen, you will have an opportunity to address the court at sentencing." As bailiffs led Sabrina away, she caught Hunter's eye across the courtroom. The look she gave him was pure hatred, but also recognition. She finally understood that she'd never been hunting Hunter Allen. He'd been hunting her. After the trial, Hunter stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters. "Mr. Allen, how does it feel to see your wife convicted?" "I feel justice has been served for Charlotte Fowler, Timothy Douglas, Marcus Woods, and all the other victims. What's next for you and your son?" "We're moving forward. Charlie's young enough to heal from his trauma, and we have excellent support systems. Do you harbor any resentment toward your wife?" Hunter considered the question carefully. Resentment implies ongoing emotion towards someone who no longer matters. Sabrina Douglas Allen is a problem that's been solved. That evening, Hunter returned to his house, which he'd already put on the market. Too many bad memories, too much contamination from Sabrina's presence. He and Charlie would start fresh in a new city, far from the scene of their trauma. In his study, Hunter reviewed the final reports from his team. Elliot Porter would die in prison. Detective Jackson faced 10 years for corruption. Sabrina would likely receive the death penalty, though appeals would drag on for years. More importantly, the investigation had identified 3 other potential victims Sabrina and Elliot had been monitoring. Those people had been quietly warned and were now safely aware of the danger they'd unknowingly faced. Hunter Allen had built his fortune by being thorough, patient, and utterly ruthless with those who crossed him. In the case of his wife's betrayal, those qualities had served justice. Charlie bounded into the study, his cast finally removed, his arm fully healed. "Daddy, when do we see the new house?" "Tomorrow, buddy. Are you excited?" "Yeah, we'll have a big tree to climb." Hunter smiled, remembering simpler times when his biggest worry was whether his son would scrape his knee playing outside. "The biggest tree you've ever seen. But we'll build a proper tree house this time, with safety railings and everything." "Can Aunt Trinity help?" "Of course. Family takes care of family." As Charlie ran off to play, Hunter reflected on the lessons of the past year. Trust was precious and easily shattered. Family, real family, was worth protecting at any cost. And some betrayals were so fundamental they could never be forgiven. But he'd learned something else. Sometimes the best revenge was simply ensuring that justice was served completely and publicly. Sabrina Douglas Allen had spent years believing she was smarter than everyone around her. She died believing she could manipulate and murder without consequences. She'd been wrong on both counts. Chapter 8. Retribution. The federal penitentiary in Victorville, California, was not designed for comfort. Sabrina Douglas Allen had spent 8 months in administrative segregation, awaiting the conclusion of her appeals process. Her death sentence had been upheld at every level, and her execution date was now 6 weeks away. Hunter Allen made the drive from his new home in San Diego on a gray Tuesday morning in February. The visiting room was sterile and heavily monitored, designed to prevent any contraband exchange or unauthorized communication. Sabrina looked older than her 42 years. Prison had stripped away the last vestiges of the beautiful, charming woman who'd once seduced wealthy men to their deaths. Her hair had grown gray, her skin pale and lined with stress. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, settling into the plastic chair across from him. "I wanted to see you one last time. To gloat. To close the book." Sabrina studied his face, looking for some crack in his composure, some angle she could still work. "Charlie doesn't visit. Charlie doesn't know you exist. As far as he's concerned, his mother died in a car accident 2 years ago. He's been in therapy, but he's healing. You erased me from his life. I protected him from you. There's a difference." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of their shared history and mutual destruction heavy between them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never found out?" Sabrina asked. "No. You would have killed me and eventually killed Charlie. Then you would have moved on to your next victim. Maybe. Or maybe I would have been content with you." Hunter shook his head. "People like you don't get content, Sabrina. You get bored. And bored serial killers are dangerous serial killers. People like me? Predators. You enjoyed the hunt, the manipulation, the kill. The money was just a bonus." Sabrina's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of the cold intelligence beneath. "You enjoyed destroying me just as much." "Yes, I did." His honesty seemed to surprise her. "At least you're honest about it." "I've never pretended to be a good man, Sabrina. I'm just a better predator than you were." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to explain why you lost." Hunter leaned forward slightly. "You want to know the difference between us? You killed innocent people for money. I destroyed a serial killer to protect innocent people. You targeted the vulnerable. I targeted the guilty. You still destroyed a family. Your own family. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to hurt Charlie. Everything that followed was consequence." Sabrina's composure finally cracked. "I loved you. In my own way, I did love you." "No, you didn't. You loved what I represented. Security, wealth, respectability. You saw me as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. And now you're a problem that's been solved." The guard called time, and Hunter stood to leave. "Hunter," Sabrina called. "When they execute me, will you be there?" He considered the question seriously. "No, you don't deserve that much of my attention. What will you tell Charlie about me when he's older?" "The truth, that his biological mother was sick, and that sickness made her dangerous to people she should have protected. And about you? Will you tell him what you're capable of?" Hunter paused at the door. "Charlie will learn that some people in this world hurt others for pleasure or profit. And he'll learn that those people can be stopped by someone willing to pay the necessary price. What if he becomes like you? Then God help anyone who threatens his family." Hunter left the prison without looking back. 3 hours later, he was home in time to pick Charlie up from school. "How was your day, buddy?" "Good. We're studying butterflies in science class. Did you know they start as caterpillars and completely change into something different?" "I didn't know that. It's called metamorphosis." "Metamorphosis," Charlie repeated carefully. "Can people do that too? Change into something completely different?" Hunter thought about his wife, who'd changed from apparent innocence to revealed monstrosity. About Elliot Porter, who'd transformed from predator to broken victim. About himself, who'd evolved from trusting husband to calculating hunter. Sometimes Charlie, but usually people just become more of what they already were inside. "What you inside, Daddy?" Hunter looked at his son, healthy, happy, safe, and completely unaware of the violence that had been necessary to preserve his innocence. I'm someone who protects the people I love. 6 weeks later, Sabrina Douglas Allen was executed by lethal injection at 12:01 a.m. Hunter was not present. He was at home, reading Charlie a bedtime story about a brave knight who defeated a dragon to save his kingdom. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 2 years after Sabrina's execution, Hunter Allen stood on the deck of his new home overlooking Mission Bay in San Diego. The house was smaller than their previous home, but felt larger somehow, uncontaminated by memories of betrayal and violence. Charlie, now 8 years old, was in the backyard with his new stepmother, Trinity McCarty Allen. Hunter had married his sister-in-law 18 months after Sabrina's death, as much for practical reasons as emotional ones. Charlie needed a mother figure, Trinity needed stability after her divorce, and Hunter needed someone he could trust absolutely. Their marriage was built on honesty rather than passion. Trinity knew everything about Sabrina, about the murders, about Hunter's role in bringing justice. She'd accepted it all because she understood the fundamental truth. Hunter Allen was dangerous to those who threatened his family, but utterly devoted to those who earned his loyalty. "Daddy, look," Charlie called, pointing to the elaborate treehouse Hunter had built in their massive oak tree. "Trinity taught me how to tie nautical knots." "Show me," Hunter called back, watching his son demonstrate his new skill with the patience and precision that seemed to be inherited Allen traits. The last 2 years had been about healing and rebuilding. Charlie had no memory of Sabrina pushing him from the tree. Trauma therapy had helped process those experiences without creating permanent damage. He remembered her as someone who'd gotten sick and died, a sanitized version of the truth that protected his childhood while laying groundwork for more complete honesty when he was older. Hunter's business had expanded significantly. The notoriety from the trial had initially hurt his reputation, but the revelation that he'd helped stop a serial killer network had ultimately enhanced his standing. People wanted to work with someone who could handle extreme situations with calculated precision. More importantly, he'd found peace with his own nature. Hunter Allen was not a good man in any conventional sense. He was ruthless, unforgiving, and capable of extraordinary violence when motivated. But he was also protective, loyal, and completely devoted to justice as he understood it. His phone buzzed with a text from Luke Hammond. "New client wants to meet." Husband suspects wife of infidelity. Sound familiar? Hunter smiled grimly. Luke had parlayed his role in the Sabrina case into a thriving private investigation business, specializing in domestic cases with potential criminal elements. He texted back, "Not interested in marriage counseling. This is different. Wife's previous husband died under suspicious circumstances. Client is scared." Hunter considered the request. Part of him wanted to stay retired from the hunting business to focus on being a father and husband. But another part, the part that had systematically destroyed Elliot Porter and Sabrina Douglas, stirred with interest. There were predators in the world who targeted innocent people. Serial killers who used marriage as a hunting strategy. Corrupt officials who protected murderers for money or family loyalty. And there were people like Hunter Allen who understood that sometimes the only way to stop monsters was to become something monstrous yourself. "Daddy, come up," Charlie called from the treehouse. Trinity made sandwiches. Hunter looked up at his son, healthy, happy, safe, and completely innocent of the violence that swirled around him. Charlie would grow up knowing he was protected, knowing his father would move heaven and earth to keep him safe. "Coming, buddy." Hunter climbed the ladder Trinity had insisted on installing, joining his family in their carefully constructed refuge above the dangers of the world. As they ate lunch in the treehouse, Charlie chattered about school, friends, and plans for the weekend. Trinity listened with the focused attention of someone who understood how precious these moments were. "Can we go to the beach tomorrow?" Charlie asked. "Of course," Hunter replied. "We'll make a whole day of it. Will you teach me to surf?" "When you're a little older. But I'll teach you to read the currents, to understand when water is safe and when it's dangerous." Charlie nodded seriously, absorbing the lesson that everything in life required careful assessment of risk and benefit. After lunch, as Trinity helped Charlie with homework, Hunter returned to his study and considered Luke's text. Somewhere in the city, a man was living with a woman who might be planning his death. That man was probably experiencing the same growing unease Hunter had felt in the weeks before discovering Sabrina's true nature. The difference was that this potential victim had reached out for help before it was too late. Hunter opened his laptop and typed a response to Luke, set up the meeting. I want to hear what he has to say. Because predators never stopped hunting. They found new victims, new schemes, new ways to exploit human trust and vulnerability. And sometimes the only way to stop them was to hunt them first. Hunter Allen had learned to live with his own nature. The calculating intelligence that could build business empires, the patience that could wait years for the perfect moment, the ruthlessness that could destroy enemies completely. Most importantly, he learned to use those traits in service of something larger than himself, the protection of innocent people from those who had hurt them. In his desk drawer, Hunter kept 2 photographs. One showed Charlie on his first day of school in San Diego, grinning with 8-year-old optimism. The other was a news clipping from Sabrina's execution, a reminder of what happened to people who threatened his family. Both photographs represented the same truth. Hunter Allen would do whatever was necessary to protect the people he loved. And in a world full of predators, that was exactly the kind of father Charlie Allen needed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Call That Changed Everything. Derek Morrison was reviewing quarterly reports in his downtown law office when the phone rang. 23 years of criminal defense work had taught him to recognize when something was seriously wrong, and the tension in the officer's voice immediately put him on alert. Mr. Morrison, this is Detective Rodriguez with Metro Police. We found your 3-year-old son. Please come pick him up. Derek's pen stopped mid-signature. I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. I don't have a child. Sir, please just come down to the station. The child has your last name, and we need to sort this out. Precinct 14 on 5th Street. The drive downtown felt surreal. Derek Morrison, 45, had built his reputation on being unshakable in court. But this phone call had rattled him. He'd been married to Lindsay for 8 years, and they'd never had children. She'd always claimed she wasn't ready, that her career as a real estate agent was too demanding. They'd had arguments about it, but eventually he'd accepted her position. The police station buzzing with afternoon activity. Derek approached the front desk, his expensive suit drawing the usual respectful nods from officers who recognized him from courtrooms across the city. I'm Derek Morrison. Someone called about a child. Detective Rodriguez, a weathered man in his 50s, led him down a hallway to a small room with toys scattered across the floor. The boy was found wandering alone in Riverside Park. No identification, but he kept saying his last name was Morrison and that his daddy worked in the big building with all the cars. Derek's blood ran cold. That was how Lindsay always described his office building. It sat above a parking garage downtown. When we ran the name Morrison in our system, you came up. The description the boy gave of his father, well, it matches you pretty closely. They reached the room, and Rodriguez opened the door. Derek stepped inside and froze. Standing there was a small boy with dark hair and blue eyes, Derek's eyes. The child looked up at him with a mixture of fear and hope that made Derek's chest tighten. The resemblance was unmistakable. This was his son. Daddy, the boy said quietly. Derek knelt down, his mind racing. What's your name, son? Mason. Mason Morrison. Mommy said you were always working, but that you loved me very much. The room spun. Derek forced himself to remain calm, a skill honed from years of handling devastating evidence in court. Where's your mommy, Mason? She went to see Uncle Troy. She said she'd be back soon, but I got scared and went looking for you. Uncle Troy. Derek knew exactly who that was. Troy Castellano, Lindsay's former high school boyfriend who'd moved back to town 2 years ago. The same Troy who'd been calling the house recently, always with some excuse about catching up. The same Troy that Lindsay had been showing houses to for months. Derek's jaw clenched. Everything clicked into place with brutal clarity. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way Lindsay had been distant lately. She'd been living a double life, and apparently, she'd been raising his son with another man. Detective Rodriguez, Derek said, standing slowly. I'll need to make some arrangements. Can someone watch Mason for a few hours while I sort things out? Of course. But sir, we'll need to contact the mother. Do you have her information? Derek pulled out his phone, staring at his wife's contact information. His wife, who'd been lying to him for over 3 years. Who'd hidden his own son from him. Who'd been playing house with her lover while Derek worked 60-hour weeks to support the lifestyle she demanded. I'll handle contacting her, Derek said, his voice deadly calm. Trust me, detective. I'll handle everything. As he looked down at Mason, who was clutching a small toy car, Derek felt something cold and calculating settle into his chest. He'd built his career destroying people who thought they could outsmart the system. Now, he was going to turn those skills on the two people who'd betrayed him most deeply. Lindsay and Troy had no idea what was coming, but Derek Morrison had just become the most dangerous enemy they'd ever made. Chapter 2. Unraveling the Deception. Derek left the police station with Rodriguez's assurance that Mason would be cared for while he made arrangements. But Derek wasn't arranging childcare. He was planning war. His first stop was his office, where he pulled every resource at his disposal. As a criminal defense attorney with connections throughout the city's legal system, Derek had access to investigators, databases, and information networks that most people could only dream of. He started with a simple background check on Troy Castellano. Within an hour, the picture became clearer. Troy had moved back to town exactly 3 years and 2 months ago, right around the time Mason would have been conceived. He'd taken a job as a construction supervisor, the kind of blue-collar work that Lindsay had always claimed to look down on. But the real revelation came when Derek's private investigator, Rita Kowalski, delivered her preliminary report. Derek, you're not going to like this, Rita said, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. I ran surveillance footage from that park where the kid was found. Your wife and Castellano have been meeting there regularly for months. And get this, they've got a whole setup. Apartment lease under both their names across town. The kid's been living there. Derek's knuckles whitened as he gripped the desk edge. Show me. Rita opened her laptop, pulling up surveillance footage from various locations around the city. There was Lindsay, his wife of 8 years, kissing Troy Castellano outside a coffee shop. There she was again, holding Mason's hand as they walked into an apartment complex Derek had never seen before. The apartment's been leased for 2 years, Rita continued. Looks like they've been playing house while you've been paying for the real house. Your wife's been living a double life, Derek. She's got a whole other family. Derek studied the photos with the same methodical attention he used when examining evidence for capital murder cases. But this wasn't about defending someone else. This was about destroying the people who'd made him a fool. I want everything, Rita. Financial records, phone logs, social media, employment history. And I want to know everyone who knew about this and kept quiet. Derek, Rita said carefully, what are you planning? Derek leaned back in his leather chair. The same one where he'd planned defense strategies that had freed killers and destroyed prosecutors' careers. I'm planning justice, Rita, the kind that actually works. Over the next few hours, Derek's network of contacts revealed the full scope of the betrayal. Lindsay's sister knew about Mason. So did her mother. Even their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had been covering for Lindsay's absences. But the most devastating discovery came when Derek reviewed their joint bank account records. Lindsay hadn't just been cheating. She'd been funding her second life with his money. Thousands of dollars in withdrawals that she'd claimed were for client entertainment and professional development had actually been going toward the apartment, furniture, and supporting Mason. Derek had been working himself to exhaustion to pay for his wife's affair. As evening approached, Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Lindsay. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. The words made his stomach turn. Derek typed back. Miss you too. See you tomorrow. Then he called Detective Rodriguez. I've arranged for temporary custody of Mason. I'll pick him up in the morning and take him home. What about the mother? She's been informed. Derek lied smoothly. She's dealing with a family emergency out of state. I'll be Mason's primary caretaker for now. Derek Morrison had spent his career in courtrooms where one mistake could mean the difference between freedom and life in prison. He'd learned that victory went to whoever planned most carefully and struck most ruthlessly. Lindsay and Troy thought they were clever. They thought they'd outsmarted him. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. As Derek locked his office and headed home to his empty house, he was already 3 moves ahead. Tomorrow, Mason would come home to meet the father he'd been kept from, and Lindsay would walk into a trap that would destroy everything she thought she'd built. Derek Morrison never lost a case when he had the evidence on his side, and now he had all the evidence he needed. Chapter 3: The Father's Return. The next morning, Derek picked up Mason from the temporary child services facility where he'd spent the night. The 3-year-old was clutching the same toy car, his eyes wide as Derek buckled him into a car seat he'd purchased an hour earlier. "Are we going to see Mommy?" Mason asked as they drove through the city. "Soon," Derek said, his voice gentle despite the fury burning in his chest. "First, I want to show you your real home." Derek had spent the early morning hours transforming the guest bedroom into a child's room. He'd hired a service to deliver furniture, toys, and everything a 3-year-old might need. When they arrived at the house, Mason's face lit up with wonder. "This is all mine?" Mason asked, running his small hands over a wooden train set. "Yes, son. This is where you belong." Derek knelt down to Mason's level, studying the boy's face. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same jawline, the same stubborn cowlick, the same way of tilting his head when curious. This was his child, kept from him for 3 years by the woman he trusted most. "Mason, I need to ask you something important. At your other house, the one with Mommy and Uncle Troy, did they tell you not to talk about me?" Mason nodded solemnly. "Mommy said you were very busy and couldn't visit. She said it made you sad to talk about me. So was our secret." Derek's hands clenched into fists. Lindsay had poisoned his own son against him, made the boy believe his father didn't want him. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "That's not true, Mason. I wanted to know you your whole life. And now I'm going to make sure nothing separates us again." Derek spent the morning with Mason, learning about his son's favorite foods, his fear of thunderstorms, his love of construction trucks, probably influenced by Troy's job. Every detail carved another mark in Derek's mental tally of what Lindsay and Troy had stolen from him. At noon, Derek's phone rang. Lindsay's name appeared on the screen. "Derek, I just got the strangest call from the police. They said something about Mason being found, but that's impossible. He's right here with..." Lindsay's voice trailed off, and Derek could practically hear the moment reality crash down on her. "Hello, Lindsay." Derek's voice was ice cold. "I think we need to talk." "Derek, I can explain." "No." Derek cut her off. "You can't. There's no explanation for keeping my son from me for 3 years. There's no explanation for the lies, the deception, the betrayal. Where's Mason? Is he safe?" Mason is exactly where he should be, with his father, in his real home. Derek could hear Lindsay's panicked breathing. "Derek, please. You don't understand the situation. It's complicated. It's really not complicated at all. You've been living a double life, playing house with Troy Castellano while I paid for everything. You've been stealing from our joint accounts to fund your little fantasy. And worst of all, you've been keeping my son from me. Derek, listen to me." "No, Lindsay, you listen to me." Derek's voice dropped to the deadly calm tone he used when cross-examining witnesses he was about to destroy. "I know about the apartment. I know about the bank withdrawals. I know about everyone who helped you lie to me. And now I'm going to show you exactly what happens to people who betray Derek Morrison." "Derek, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. You should have been scared the moment you decided to steal my child and my life." Derek hung up the phone and turned to see Mason playing happily with his new toys. His son was safe now, but Derek's work was far from finished. He opened his laptop and began composing the first phase of his revenge. By the time he was done, Lindsay and Troy wouldn't just lose each other. They'd lose everything. Derek Morrison had spent 23 years learning how to destroy people legally and thoroughly. He'd ruined prosecutors, discredited witnesses, and torn apart cases that seemed airtight. Now, he was going to use those skills on a much more personal target. Lindsay and Troy had taken 3 years of his son's life. Derek was going to take everything from them in return. And unlike his son, they would never get any of it back. Chapter 4. Setting the Trap. Derek spent the weekend with Mason, learning his son's routines and building the foundation of a relationship that should have existed from birth. But even as he read bedtime stories and pushed Mason on the playground swings, Derek's mind was orchestrating the systematic destruction of the two people who'd stolen these moments from him. Monday morning brought the first phase of his plan into action. Derek's law firm, Morrison & Associates, occupied 3 floors of downtown's most prestigious office building. His connections reached into every level of city government, law enforcement, and the business community. Over his career, he'd collected favors from judges, prosecutors, police commanders, and city officials. Now it was time to call them in. His first call was to District Attorney Patricia Vega, a woman whose career Derek had helped salvage 5 years earlier when corruption charges had threatened to destroy her. "Patricia, I need a favor," Derek said, settling into his office chair as Mason played quietly in the corner with building blocks. "Name it, Derek. After what you did for me, I owe you. I need you to look into a construction company called Castellano Contracting. Specifically, their safety compliance and worker documentation. I have reason to believe they're cutting corners." Derek had spent Sunday night researching Troy's business. The man ran a small construction crew that specialized in residential remodeling. From what Derek's investigator had uncovered, Troy's operation was typical of many small contractors, operating in the gray areas of regulations, cutting corners to underbid competitors. "I'll have inspectors out there this week," Patricia promised. "Anything specific I should know? Just be thorough." Very thorough. Derek's second call was to his contact at the city's housing authority. Then came calls to the health department, the labor board, and the immigration enforcement office. By lunchtime, Derek had set in motion a web of official scrutiny that would crush Troy's business from 6 different directions. But Troy was just the opening move. For Lindsay, Derek had something far more personal planned. Derek's third call was to Monica Torres, the top real estate broker in the city and Lindsay's biggest competitor. Monica had been trying to poach Lindsay's biggest clients for years. "Monica, it's Derek Morrison. I have a business proposition for you." "Derek, how's the family?" The irony of the question almost made Derek laugh. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Lindsay and I are having some marital difficulties. I'm concerned about the ethics of her business practices. I think you should know that she's been using our joint accounts to fund personal expenses while claiming they were business costs. That's serious, Derek. It gets worse. I've discovered she's been lying to clients about her availability and qualifications. She's been running a side business that's creating conflicts of interest with her main job at Premier Properties." Derek spent 20 minutes feeding Monica carefully crafted half-truths that would plant seeds of doubt about Lindsay's professional integrity. He knew Monica would spread the information through the real estate community within days. The final call of the day was to Derek's banker, Robert Shun, at First National. "Robert, I need to restructure some accounts. I've discovered some unauthorized use of our joint funds, and I need to protect my assets while we sort things out." "Of course, Derek. Identity theft is becoming so common these days." Derek didn't correct the assumption. Within an hour, he'd moved all their liquid assets into accounts that only he controlled. Lindsay's credit cards were quietly canceled, her access to their investment accounts frozen. By Tuesday morning, the first phase of Derek's plan was already bearing fruit. Troy's construction sites were swarmed by city inspectors who found exactly what Derek had suspected they'd find: safety violations, improper permits, and undocumented workers. 3 jobs were shut down immediately, and Troy faced fines that would cripple his business. Lindsay discovered her financial situation when her credit card was declined at a client lunch. When she called the bank, she was told the account had been closed due to suspected fraudulent activity. Derek's phone rang as he was feeding Mason lunch. "Derek, what the hell is going on?" Lindsay's voice was tight with panic. "My cards aren't working, and Troy says the city shut down all his jobs. This can't be a coincidence. I told you there would be consequences," Derek said calmly, cutting Mason's sandwich into triangles. This is just the beginning. You can't do this. I have rights. So did I. The right to know my son. The right to know my wife wasn't stealing from me. The right to know she wasn't living a double life. Derek's voice remained perfectly calm, which made it more terrifying. You took away my rights for 3 years. Now I'm taking away yours. Derek, please. We can work this out. We could go to counseling. We can... No, Lindsay. We can't. You made your choice when you decided to steal my son and my money to play house with another man. Now you get to live with the consequences. Derek hung up and turned his attention back to Mason, who was arranging his sandwich pieces into the shape of a house. Daddy, will Mommy come visit soon? Derek looked at his son's hopeful face and felt his resolve harden even further. Mason deserved better than the lies and deception that had defined his first 3 years. Soon, son. But first, Daddy has some work to finish. Derek Morrison was just getting started. Phase 1 had been about destabilizing his enemies. Phase 2 would be about destroying them completely. And Derek had never lost a case he was determined to win. Chapter 5. The Net Titans. By Wednesday, Derek's carefully orchestrated campaign was gaining momentum like an avalanche. He watched from his office as the city's bureaucratic machinery ground Lindsay and Troy's lives into dust. Each phone call and inspection triggering the next level of scrutiny. Troy's situation was deteriorating rapidly. The construction company that had been his pride and livelihood was hemorrhaging money. City inspectors had found asbestos in 3 of his renovation projects, leading to costly remediation requirements. The labor board had discovered payroll violations that carried hefty fines. Most damaging of all, an immigration audit had revealed that several of his workers lacked proper documentation. Derek's investigator Rita provided regular updates. Troy's tried to liquidate assets to pay the fines, but it's not enough. Word's getting around the construction community that his company is toxic. No one wants to partner with him on new projects. And Lindsay, she's in full panic mode. Her boss at Premier Properties called her in for a meeting yesterday. Apparently, Monica Torres has been spreading rumors about her professional conduct. 3 of her biggest clients have requested new agents. Derek allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. But Derek wasn't finished. The next phase would hit closer to home. Derek had spent Tuesday evening carefully reviewing all the legal documents in his household. What he found was a goldmine of leverage. The house was titled solely in his name, purchased before their marriage. The cars were in his name. Even Lindsay's engagement ring had been insured under his policy. More importantly, Derek had discovered that Lindsay had been forging his signature on several financial documents related to her real estate career. She'd used his credentials as a lawyer to enhance her credibility with high-end clients, signing documents that required his approval without ever asking for it. That was a felony. Wednesday afternoon, Derek made another call to DA Patricia Vega. Patricia, I need to report crime. I've discovered my wife has been forging my signature on legal documents. I have copies of everything. Derek, I'm sorry to hear about your personal troubles. Are you sure you want to pursue criminal charges? This could get very messy very quickly. I'm absolutely certain. She's committed fraud, and she needs to face the consequences. Within hours, a warrant was issued for Lindsay's arrest on charges of forgery and fraud. Derek made sure he was the one to deliver the news. Lindsay, the police will probably contact you soon about some financial irregularities they've discovered. I thought you should know. What are you talking about? Her voice was strained. Derek could hear the exhaustion that came from 3 days of watching her world collapse. The forged signatures on the Morrison Trust documents. The fraudulent use of my credentials with your clients. It's all there in black and white. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Derek, I only did that to help our family. To build our future. Our family? Lindsay, you were building a future with another man using my son and my money. That's not family. That's theft. Please, Derek, I know I made mistakes, but this is going too far. Troy's business is ruined. I might lose my job. And now criminal charges. Derek looked across his office to where Mason was napping on the couch, exhausted from a morning at the zoo. His son looked peaceful in a way that Derek had never seen in the brief glimpses he'd caught at the police station. You had 3 years to think about consequences, Lindsay. 3 years while you were stealing my son's childhood from both of us. This is what justice looks like. Justice? Derek, this is revenge. Yes, Derek said quietly. It is, and I'm very good at revenge. That evening, Derek received a call from Rita with news that made his day complete. Derek, you're going to love this. Troy showed up at Lindsay's real job today, screaming about how everything was her fault. Made a huge scene in front of clients and management. Security had to escort him out. And Lindsay's boss fired her on the spot. So they couldn't have that kind of drama associated with their company. Her real estate license is under review by the state board because of the forgery charges. Derek felt a deep sense of satisfaction settle over him. Lindsay and Troy were turning on each other, exactly as he'd predicted. When people were desperate and cornered, they always blamed their accomplices first. There's more, Rita continued. Troy's landlord evicted him from the construction office. Turns out the lease was in both his and Lindsay's names, and the landlord wants nothing to do with the legal troubles. Troy's living out of his truck. What about the apartment where they were keeping Mason? Abandoned. Landlord's going after them for 3 months back rent. Apparently, they stopped paying when the money got tight. Derek hung up the phone and walked over to check on Mason, who was stirring from his nap. His son's eyes opened, immediately searching for Derek's face. Daddy? Where are we? We're home, son. We're safe at home. Derek had torn down his enemies' lives piece by piece, using the same methodical precision he brought to his legal work. But he wasn't finished yet. The final phase would ensure that Lindsay and Troy never had the chance to hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt him. Derek Morrison had built his career on the principle that justice was about more than punishment. It was about ensuring that dangerous people could never repeat their crimes. Tomorrow, he would make sure Lindsay and Troy would never be able to rebuild what he destroyed. Chapter 6, Scorched Earth. Thursday morning brought news that Derek had been anticipating with grim satisfaction. Lindsay had been arrested at her sister's house, where she'd been staying since being evicted from her apartment with Troy. The charges included forgery, fraud, and embezzlement. The financial crimes Derek had carefully documented through his investigation. Derek watched the news coverage from his office while Mason played with educational tablets Derek had purchased. The report was brief but damaging. Local real estate agent arrested on fraud charges, accused of using forged documents to defraud clients. The phone rang almost immediately. It was Lindsay's lawyer, Amanda Foster, a competent attorney but nowhere near Derek's league. Derek, we need to talk. This has gone far enough. Has it? I don't think so, Amanda. Your client committed multiple felonies while stealing my son from me. If anything, this hasn't gone nearly far enough. She's willing to negotiate a custody arrangement. Supervised visitation, shared holidays. Derek's laugh was cold and sharp. Supervised visitation? Amanda, your client kept my son's secret from me for 3 years while she played house with her boyfriend. She's facing federal fraud charges. She has no job, no income, and no stable housing. What exactly does she think she's negotiating with? Derek, she's still Mason's mother. She's a criminal who used my son as a pawn in her affair. Mason deserves better. Derek's legal strategy was simple and brutal. He'd filed for emergency custody based on Lindsay's criminal charges and her demonstrated pattern of deception. With her arrest record, financial instability, and the evidence of her lies, no judge would grant her anything more than supervised visits, if that. But Derek had bigger plans than just winning custody. Derek's next call was to his contact at the State Real Estate Licensing Board. Tom, it's Derek Morrison. I wanted to follow up on the complaint I filed against Lindsay Morrison. Derek, I'm sorry about your personal situation. We're reviewing her license based on the fraud charges, but these things take time. I understand, but there's additional evidence you should see. My investigator has documented a pattern of ethical violations going back 2 years. Conflicts of interest, client confidentiality breaches, misuse of trust accounts. Derek had Rita compile every questionable transaction in Lindsay's career, every corner cut, every rule bent. Individually, they might have resulted in warnings or small fines. Together, they painted a picture of systematic professional misconduct. I'll have our investigators review everything you send over, Tom promised. Derek's campaign wasn't just about punishment. It was about permanent destruction. He wanted to ensure that Lindsay could never again work in real estate, never again have the financial independence to challenge him for custody, never again have the means to disrupt Mason's life. Friday brought the news Derek had been waiting for. Troy Castellano had been arrested on charges related to his construction business, tax evasion, labor violations, and using undocumented workers. The charges carried potential federal prison time. But more importantly, Troy had been picked up at a bar where he'd been drinking heavily and talking loudly about his troubles. According to the police report Rita obtained, Troy had been telling anyone who would listen that the whole thing was Lindsay's idea and that she'd trapped him into the relationship. Derek smiled as he read the report. Troy was doing exactly what Derek had predicted, protecting himself by throwing Lindsay under the bus. Derek's phone rang. It was Amanda Foster again. Derek, my client wants to meet with you. Face to face. She says there are things about Mason's paternity that you need to know. Derek's blood ran cold. What kind of things? She won't tell me. She insists on speaking with you directly. Derek considered the request. It could be a trap, or it could be Lindsay's last desperate attempt to gain leverage. Either way, Derek was confident in his position. Fine. Saturday afternoon. My office. And Amanda? Make sure she understands that this meeting changes nothing. The criminal charges stand. The custody filing stands. This is her one chance to say whatever she thinks needs saying. Saturday arrived gray and cold, matching Derek's mood as he prepared for what he knew would be his final confrontation with a woman who'd stolen 3 years of his son's life. Derek had Mason staying with his parents for the weekend. He didn't want his son anywhere near the ugliness that was about to unfold. As Derek waited in his office, reviewing the devastating case file he'd built against Lindsay and Troy, he felt the satisfaction of a job well done. Both of his enemies were facing criminal charges that would destroy their futures. Lindsay had lost her career, her income, and any hope of gaining custody of Mason. Troy's business was in ruins, and he was facing federal prison time. Derek Morrison had done what he'd promised. He'd made them pay for their betrayal. But as Derek reviewed his work, a small part of him wondered what Lindsay was so desperate to tell him. What could she possibly say that would matter now? In a few hours, Derek would have his answer. And then, finally, this chapter of his life would be closed forever. The only question was whether Lindsay's final revelation would change anything, or if Derek would simply add it to the pile of evidence he'd used to bury her for good. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. Saturday afternoon brought a cold rain that matched the atmosphere in Derek's office as he waited for Lindsay and her lawyer to arrive. Derek had spent the morning reviewing every detail of his campaign against his wife and her lover, ensuring that no loose ends remained. Troy was in county jail awaiting trial on federal charges. His construction business was permanently destroyed, his assets seized to pay fines and back taxes. He'd already indicated through his public defender that he was willing to testify against Lindsay in exchange for a reduced sentence. Lindsay's situation was equally dire. Her real estate license had been permanently revoked. The fraud charges carried a potential 5-year prison sentence. She had no income, no assets, and no place to live. Derek had won completely, but something about this emergency meeting nagged at him. At precisely 2 p.m., Amanda Foster arrived with Lindsay. Derek's wife looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Derek, Lindsay said quietly as she took the seat across from his desk. Lindsay. Derek's voice was cold and professional. Amanda said you had something important to tell me. Let's get this over with. Lindsay glanced at her lawyer, then back at Derek. It's about Mason's paternity. Derek felt his stomach clench. What about it? Derek, I need you to understand something. The timing of when I got pregnant, it doesn't match what you think. What are you talking about? Lindsay took a shaky breath. Mason isn't Troy's son. He's yours. He's always been yours. Derek stared at her, his mind reeling. That's impossible. You said you weren't ready for children. We were careful. We were usually careful. But there was that weekend when you came back early from the Henderson trial. Remember? You've been gone for 3 weeks, and Lindsay's voice trailed off. Derek remembered. He'd won a major case in Los Angeles and had flown home a day early to surprise Lindsay. They'd had a passionate reunion that night. "You're lying," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm not lying, Derek. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks later. I was terrified. We've been fighting about having children, and I knew you'd think I'd done it on purpose to trap you. So you decided to hide the pregnancy instead?" "I was going to tell you, but then Troy moved back to town, and we started talking again. He was going through his divorce, and he was lonely. We started spending time together, and one thing led to another." Derek's mind was racing, trying to process this new information. "You had an affair because you were pregnant with my child?" "I was scared, Derek. Scared of how you'd react. Scared of becoming a mother. Scared of everything changing. Troy offered me an escape. He said he'd help raise the baby, that we could build a life together." Amanda Foster looked uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "Lindsay, maybe we should—" "No," Lindsay said firmly. "Derek needs to know the truth. Mason is your son, Derek. Biologically, completely, utterly yours. Troy never believed otherwise, but he was willing to pretend for my sake." Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the city where he'd systematically destroyed 2 lives over the past week. "You're telling me that I spent the last week destroying a man who was helping to raise my own son?" "Yes. And you let me believe that Troy was Mason's father?" "I never said that explicitly. You assumed it when Mason called him Uncle Troy." Derek turned back to face his wife, and Lindsay flinched at the fury in his eyes. "You let me believe that I was fighting for a son who belonged to another man. You let me think that my child was the product of your affair. Derek, you destroyed an innocent man because you were too cowardly to tell me the truth 3 years ago." The weight of what Derek had done was crushing down on him. Troy Castellano wasn't a villain who'd stolen Derek's wife and child. He was a man who'd been willing to help raise another man's son because he loved Lindsay. Derek had used all his legal expertise and personal connections to destroy an innocent man's life. "Derek," Lindsay said quietly, "Troy knows the truth. He's always known. He was protecting me and Mason because he thought it was the right thing to do." Derek's hands were shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what I've done to him?" "I know. And Derek, I know you can fix it." Derek stared at her in disbelief. "Fix it?" "Lindsay, the man is in federal prison. His business is destroyed. His reputation is ruined. His life is over. You have connections. You have influence. You can make the charges disappear, help him rebuild. Are you insane?" Derek's voice rose to a shout. "You think I can just wave a magic wand and undo a week of systematic destruction? You did it to destroy him. You can do it to save him." Derek realized with stunning clarity that even now, even after everything, Lindsay was trying to manipulate him. She wasn't confessing out of guilt. She was trying to save Troy. "You still love him," Derek said quietly. "Yes," Lindsay admitted. "I do. And Derek, despite everything you've done to him, he still loves me. He still wants to be part of Mason's life." Derek sat back down, his mind working furiously. Lindsay was asking him to use his power and connections to rebuild the life of the man she loved. The man she'd chosen over Derek, even though Mason was Derek's son. "Let me understand this," Derek said slowly. "You want me to help Troy so that you can continue your relationship with him while I raise my son? Derek, we could work out some kind of arrangement. Shared custody, co-parenting." Derek's laugh was bitter and cold. "Shared custody? With a woman facing federal fraud charges and her boyfriend whose life I've destroyed? If you help Troy, the charges against me could disappear too. You have that power." Derek stared at his wife, finally seeing her with perfect clarity. She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't sorry. She was still scheming, still manipulating, still trying to find a way to win. "No," Derek said quietly. "Derek, please, think about what's best for Mason." "I am thinking about what's best for Mason. And what's best for him is never seeing either of you again." Derek had been prepared to feel guilty about destroying Troy if the man had been innocent. But Troy wasn't innocent. He'd been part of Lindsay's deception from the beginning. He'd helped keep Derek from his son for 3 years. Maybe Troy wasn't Mason's biological father, but he'd still stolen 3 years of Derek's life with his son. And Lindsay? She was still lying, still manipulating, still trying to use Derek's love for Mason to get what she wanted. Derek Morrison had built his career on reading people, on understanding their motivations and weaknesses. He thought he was destroying evil people who'd betrayed him. Now he realized he'd been right all along. The biology didn't matter. The betrayal was real. The theft of his son's childhood was real. The lies and manipulation were real. Troy and Lindsay had both chosen to participate in keeping Derek from his son. They'd both chosen to steal 3 years of his life. And Derek Morrison never forgave betrayal. "Get out of my office," Derek said quietly. "Derek, please. Get out." And Lindsay? "This changes nothing. Mason is my son, and he's never seeing either of you again. You made your choice 3 years ago. Now live with it." As Lindsay and her lawyer left, Derek stood at his window, looking out at the city where he'd destroyed 2 lives with surgical precision. He thought he might feel guilty if Troy turned out to be innocent. Instead, Derek felt nothing but satisfaction. Biology was irrelevant. Trevor had still chosen to help steal Derek's son from him. Lindsay had still lied and manipulated and betrayed everything Derek had trusted her with. They'd both pay the price for their choices. Forever. Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Monday morning brought the final pieces of Derek's revenge into place with devastating efficiency. The revelation about Mason's paternity hadn't changed Derek's resolve. If anything, it had crystallized his understanding that both Lindsay and Troy deserved everything that was happening to them. Derek's first call was to his contact at the district attorney's office. "Patricia, I wanted to update you on the Morrison case. My wife has admitted that the fraud was more extensive than we initially believed. She's been using my credentials and connections to legitimize her boyfriend's business dealings as well." Derek had spent Sunday night crafting a new narrative that would ensure both Lindsay and Troy faced the maximum possible penalties. The beauty was that most of it was technically true. Troy had benefited from Lindsay's access to Derek's resources and contacts. "Derek, are you sure you want to pursue this aggressively? Once we file federal charges, there's no going back." "I'm certain. My son deserves to know that justice was served." Within hours, additional federal charges were filed against both Lindsay and Troy. Conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and tax evasion. The charges carried a minimum sentence of 15 years in federal prison. Derek's second call was to the family court judge handling his custody case. "Your Honor, I wanted to inform you that new evidence has come to light regarding the other party's character and fitness as a parent." Judge Harrison was an old friend of Derek's from law school. "What kind of evidence, Derek?" "She's now facing federal racketeering charges. The FBI is investigating her for running a criminal enterprise with her boyfriend. I have documented evidence that she used my son as leverage in her criminal activities, moving him between safe houses to avoid detection." Derek was stretching the truth, but the apartment where Lindsay had been hiding Mason could easily be characterized as a safe house in the context of a fraud investigation. "Derek, given the circumstances, I'm prepared to grant you sole custody with no visitation rights for the mother pending the outcome of her criminal trial." "Thank you, Your Honor. That's exactly what I was hoping for." Derek's final call was to Rita, his investigator. "Rita, I need you to reach out to your contacts in the federal prison system. I want to make sure that when Lindsay and Troy are sentenced, they end up in facilities that are appropriate for their crimes." "Derek, what are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to ensure that their accommodations reflect the severity of their betrayal. People who steal children and defraud families deserve to be housed with other serious criminals." Rita was quiet for a moment. "Derek, you know I'll do whatever you need. But are you sure about this? Once they're in the federal system, there's no protection for them." Derek thought about Mason, playing happily in his office with the train set Derek had bought him. His son had adapted to his new life with remarkable resilience, as if he'd always belonged in Derek's home. "I'm absolutely certain. They made their choices. Now they live with the consequences." Wednesday brought news that filled Derek with satisfaction. Troy had been denied bail and was being held in federal custody pending trial. His public defender had indicated that Troy was willing to testify against Lindsay in exchange for a reduced sentence, but the prosecution wasn't interested in a deal. Lindsay's situation was even worse. The federal prosecutors had offered her a plea bargain: plead guilty to all charges and receive 25 years in federal prison, or go to trial and face life imprisonment if convicted. Derek's phone rang that afternoon. It was Amanda Foster. "Derek, I need to ask you something directly. Is there any way you'd consider asking the prosecutors to offer my client a more reasonable plea deal?" "What kind of deal are you thinking about, Amanda?" 5 years, with eligibility for parole in 3. She'd sign away all parental rights to Mason. Derek pretended to consider the offer. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Amanda. The prosecutors have made it clear that this case is about more than just fraud. It's about protecting families from predators who would steal children and destroy lives for their own gain." "Derek, she's the mother of your child." "No, Amanda. She's a criminal who happened to give birth to my son. There's a difference." "Derek, please. She's talking about taking this to trial. If she does, everything will come out in court. Every detail of your marriage, your relationship with Mason, everything." Derek's smile was cold. "Let her try. I have 23 years of experience destroying people in courtrooms. If Lindsay wants a trial, she'll get one. And when it's over, she'll wish she'd taken the plea deal." Thursday brought the final piece of Derek's puzzle into place. Troy had been attacked in federal custody by inmates who'd learned about his charges related to child exploitation. Derek had made sure the information reached the right ears through his prison contacts. Troy was now in protective custody, which meant 23-hour-a-day isolation for the rest of his sentence. When his public defender called Derek's office asking if there was anything Derek could do to help, Derek's response was simple: "Mr. Castellano participated in keeping my son from me for 3 years. He's exactly where he deserves to be." Friday afternoon, Derek was reading to Mason when his phone rang one final time. It was Lindsay calling from county jail. "Derek, I'll take the plea deal. 25 years. I'll sign away my rights to Mason. Just please, make them transfer Troy to a safer facility." Derek set down the children's book and looked at his son, who was building elaborate structures with his blocks. "No," Derek said quietly. "Derek, please. He could die in there. That's not my problem, Lindsay. You both chose to steal my son from me. You both chose to lie and deceive and manipulate. Now you both get to live with the consequences. Derek, I'm begging you. You had 3 years to think about consequences. 3 years while you were keeping my son's secret from me. This is what justice looks like." Derek hung up the phone and turned his attention back to Mason. "Daddy, will you teach me to build a courthouse like yours?" Derek smiled at his son, who would grow up knowing that his father was a man who never accepted betrayal, never forgave deception, and never let anyone steal what belonged to him. "Of course, son. And I'll teach you about justice, too. About how important it is to make sure bad people can't hurt good people." Derek Morrison had kept his promise. He'd made Lindsay and Troy pay for their betrayal. They would spend the rest of their lives in federal prison, never again able to hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt him. And Mason would grow up knowing that his father was a man who protected what mattered most. Derek had won completely, and he'd sleep while knowing that justice had been served. Chapter 9. The Ruthless Father's Victory. 5 years later, Derek Morrison stood in the same office where he'd first learned about his son's existence, but everything had changed. The walls now displayed Mason's artwork alongside Derek's legal awards. Family photos showed father and son at baseball games, camping trips, and school events. 5 years of memories that Derek had refused to let anyone steal from him again. Mason, now 8 years old, was completing his homework at the small desk Derek had installed in the corner of his office. The boy had grown into a confident, intelligent child who excelled in school and showed early signs of inheriting his father's analytical mind. "Dad, Tommy's mom wants to know if you can help with her divorce case," Mason said, looking up from his math homework. Derek smiled at his son. Over the years, Mason had completely adapted to his new life. He rarely asked about his mother anymore, and Derek had carefully crafted a narrative that painted Lindsay as someone who'd made bad choices and couldn't be part of their lives anymore. "I'll think about it, son. Finish your homework first." Derek's life had settled into a routine of work and parenting that brought him deep satisfaction. He'd hired a nanny to help with Mason's care, but Derek insisted on being present for every important moment. He coached Mason's little league team, attended every school play, and made sure his son never felt abandoned again. The phone rang, interrupting Derek's thoughts. It was Rita, his investigator, with her monthly update on Lindsay and Troy's situations. "Derek, thought you want to know. Lindsay's appeal was denied again. She's looking at the full 25 years with no possibility of early release. And Troy, still in protective custody. He's developed some kind of mental health issue from the isolation. His lawyer keeps filing motions for transfer to a psychiatric facility, but they keep getting denied." Derek felt the familiar satisfaction that came with knowing his enemies were still paying for their crimes. Over the past 5 years, both Lindsay and Troy had tried repeatedly to reduce their sentences or improve their conditions. Every appeal had been denied, every motion dismissed. Derek's connections and influence ensured that their suffering continued exactly as he'd planned. "Rita, I want you to keep monitoring their situations. If either of them ever gets close to early release or transfer, I want to know immediately." "Of course, Derek. But honestly, neither of them is going anywhere anytime soon. Troy's mental state is deteriorating rapidly, and Lindsay's legal options are exhausted." Derek hung up and returned his attention to Mason, who was struggling with a particularly difficult math problem. "Dad, can you help me with this one?" Derek knelt beside his son's desk, patiently explaining the problem. These are the moments Derek treasured most, the quiet father-son interactions that Lindsay and Troy had stolen from him for 3 years. That evening, as Derek tucked Mason into bed, his son looked up at him with the same blue eyes Derek saw in the mirror every morning. "Dad, do you ever think about getting married again?" Derek considered the question carefully. Over the years, several women had shown interest in him. Attractive, successful women who would have made suitable stepmother for Mason. But Derek had never seriously considered remarrying. "Why do you ask, son? Some of the kids at school have stepmoms. I just wondered if you ever got lonely." Derek sat on the edge of Mason's bed, choosing his words carefully. "Son, some people in this world can be trusted, and some can't. I learned that lesson the hard way. The most important thing is that you and I trust each other completely. I trust you, Dad. And I trust you. That's all we need." As Derek turned off Mason's bedroom light and headed downstairs to his study, he reflected on the path his life had taken. 5 years ago, he'd been a successful lawyer with a lying wife and a secret son. Today, he was a single father who'd built an unbreakable bond with his child while ensuring that the people who'd betrayed them both paid the ultimate price. Derek opened his laptop and reviewed the financial reports from his law firm. Business had never been better. His reputation for ruthlessness had actually enhanced his career. Clients knew that Derek Morrison would stop at nothing to protect their interests. The phone rang one final time. It was the warden at the federal facility where Lindsay was serving her sentence. "Mr. Morrison, I wanted to inform you that inmate Morrison has requested permission to send a letter to her son. Per your instructions, we've denied the request, but I wanted you to know. Thank you for following protocol. Has she made any other requests? She's asking for permission to make a phone call to you. Something about important information regarding your son's welfare." Derek's expression hardened. Even after 5 years in federal prison, Lindsay was still trying to manipulate situations to her advantage. "Denied. And warden, I want you to make it clear to inmate Morrison that any further attempts to contact my son or myself will result in additional charges for harassment and violation of court orders." "Understood, Mr. Morrison." Derek hung up and walked to the window of his study, looking out at the city where he'd systematically destroyed 2 lives with surgical precision. Somewhere out there, in federal facilities hundreds of miles apart, Lindsay and Troy were spending another night paying for their betrayal. Derek had kept his promise. He'd made them pay for stealing his son from him. They would never be free to hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt him. And Mason would grow up knowing that his father was a man who protected what mattered most, no matter the cost. Derek Morrison poured himself a glass